when you make decisions, when you respond, when you create tactics and strategies, and it's based on you, this is one of the biggest mistakes that leaders can make, because then it can never grow outside of you. Everybody else is there to help you reach your vision and mission. It's the antithesis of everything we've been talking about on this podcast this season. Hey, what's happening? Welcome to another episode of the Futures Here podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Nixon. Of course, I'm here with Robert Boydis.
That's me.
And we talk about the things that you need to lead this next generation. And so today, we are going to expose the biggest mistakes that we think leaders make.
Yeah, it's a 6-hour episode today.
Yeah, basically, it's going to be a long one, dude. Just kidding. Stay tuned. Stick with us. Okay, here it is, man. We think these are some of the biggest mistakes. It's not fully comprehensive, but right now, as we were thinking right now in the studio, what are the things that we just keep on seeing that we go, oh, please stop doing that, right?
Yeah.
And we'll say this, we've made some of these mistakes. We get it. It's okay if you make these mistakes. What we're asking you is be aware of them and try what you can to stop making them, right? So one of our biggest things that bother us the most
comes up constantly.
All right. This is one of the biggest mistakes that you as a leader can make is not being strategic, only being tactical. So help our listeners understand what we mean by strategic and tactical.
Well, I think tactical is the idea that you do something that has an immediate payback.
Yeah.
Right. So it's usually, let's just be honest, it's usually activities, it's events, it's some sort of gathering, some sort of meeting, just something that you as a leader think, okay, I can get some immediate response, some immediate feedback, some immediate results from it. And the problem with that is that we tend to do a lot of tactical things, but they don't necessarily work together towards something bigger.
Yeah.
So we tend to work mostly bottom up. That's what I see a lot of times. Leaders work bottom up. So they start thinking about tasks and activities and then tactics.
Right.
Instead of looking at how do I actually get from my mission to my vision, which actually takes some big movements.
Yeah, it does.
And so I think of strategies as opposed to tactics, where tactics are, smaller activities with immediate payback. Strategic are kind of big movements, big steps that you take, or big rocks that you have to move to get you to somewhere further.
Yeah.
So it's a much more future-oriented type of approach. And I think the problem with this is that most leaders can't not receive immediate gratification on something.
Right.
They have a hard time postponing gratification. And with strategy, it's going to take a while before that strategy takes hold. Sometimes you're going to do 5, 6, 7, 10 things before you actually see any kind of movement on this thing. And so it takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of trust in your strategy to actually see this happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest challenge for leaders.
Well, it's interesting too, when you look at in the context of the church, like the way we've structured the institution of the church really plays towards tactics, not strategy, because the immediate gratification from the tactical move is, did the Spirit move on Sunday? Were people really worshiping? Like, how did they respond to the sermon? And then you just gear up for that again next week, and you do it again next week, and then throughout the year you have bigger events that are just tactical. Like, what are we doing for Christmas? What are we doing for Easter? What are we doing? Right? And it's just a lot of activity, and never it's divorced from an actual strategy to reach the vision.
Right.
In fact, the vision a lot of times in these spaces really gets minimized. It's like, wait, what are we all trying to do? And it's really grand.
It's very generic.
Generic, kind of, we're here to reach the world for Christ. Like,
yeah, which is great.
Cool. We want that, right? But
I think it doesn't give you any kind of anchor to move toward, or maybe that's a bad example, but it doesn't really give you any kind of pathway or roadmap of where you're going. And I think the problem is that when you're tactical, you tend to be reactive, right? You're not really planning ahead. You're basically always like catching up. Yeah. At least that's the way I see it. So, for example, you might say, "Oh man, we need to get more people here. There wasn't enough people. What can we do to get more people?" That's a very tactical kind of thing, right? We need to reach more people. So you start doing, oh, well, what if we do a backpack drive? What if we do a neighborhood thing? What if we, you know what I mean? Those are all very tactical things. But at the end of the day, my question on the strategy pieces is reach more people for what purpose?
Yeah.
Where do they go from there? So here's the interesting thing to me. Discipleship is a strategy, not a tactic.
That's good.
And that's why I think we've had a hard time with it in the church. I mean, let's just be honest. Discipleship in most churches is happening inadvertently, not intentionally.
Yeah.
And part of it is because it's a strategy. It takes a while. We all recognize that. Discipling someone, you're not going to see immediate results. That could be years before you see results. And I think there's an impatience there on the part of leaders to actually wait for those results. Or here's the hard one. Maybe never see those results,
right?
But still be okay moving forward with the strategy, knowing that somebody else, as they say, may get to pick the fruit that the tree that you planted.
Yeah, no, that's it, man. So that's a big thing for us, friends. When everything's tactical, it really basically. I'm the guy in the back going, why are we doing this? Right? Yeah. I don't understand. And a lot of times, because you haven't asked the harder questions about where are we trying to get to, and how are we going to measure that? And so, because understand this, you can do tactics all day long and never have a strategy, but you can't actually have a strategy without being tactical in what you're doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, tactics you
need them.
Yeah, will help your strategy move along.
Yeah. But then this is what helps you make those decisions. We talked about that last time on the podcast. Yeah. How do you make those decisions? That the tactics and the things you use should be connected to this overall strategy.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times what we ask our leaders when we walk them through our strategic storyline process, for example, and we get to this strategy piece, there's a tendency for them to want to say, oh, well, here's all the things that I do.
Oh, always.
And every time we write them on the board, like they're not really connected in any way. They tend to be like a shotgun blast. They're kind of like hit wherever they hit. And because it is still a grouping, it feels like, oh, well, they kind of go together. But in reality, they don't go together. So a strategy for us tends to build on itself. So one of the questions we always ask is, well, wait, what's your process for what you're trying to do? And I think if you ask that simple question, what is the process in what I'm doing? Okay, if I want to break generational cycles, right? Unhealthy generational cycles. What is the process that I'm going to go through to get them from this unhealthy state to this healthy state, right? There has to be a process for that. And that process is usually going to kind of bear out the strategy for you.
I love that, man. And we've gone through a lot of this already on this podcast where we've explained, like, if you're sitting here going, okay, I hear you guys, how do I do the strategy? Just go back to early episodes and we actually lay it all out, or hit us up directly and see if we can go through our coaching and strategic storyline process. It'd be great. The next one is that we have on here, things that the biggest mistake that leaders make is making it about themselves. Like when you make decisions, when you respond, when you create tactics and strategies, and it really is based on you. This is one of the biggest mistakes that leaders can make, because then it can never grow outside of you. Everybody else is there to help you reach your vision and mission. It's the antithesis of everything we've been talking about on this podcast this season, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and I think that's it, right? When you're talking about organizational leadership and leading an organization, there's a tendency for the leader to think, wait, this mission's mine. Like, God gave me this mission and gave me this vision. And so really everybody, I just need to build a team that's going to help me get there. It's all me oriented, right? As opposed to thinking, hey, how can I invite people to own the mission with me? Like co-ownership, right? Co-laboring for the gospel. Co-mission, the Great Commission. It's all co, and yet we treat it like it's me. I was given this task. I was given this directive, and so I have to do it by myself, and you guys are just here to make sure that I can get to where I need to get to. So
that's a huge mistake that I see a lot of leaders make, but here's what's hard about this one is it's not that, sometimes you have this, but it's not that you're a leader or you are out there just going, it's all about me and this is what,
No,
we cover it with a lot of spiritual language. We we manipulate things. We play the humility card. But we can tell by the way you operate things, and I can tell by the decisions you make, and I can tell by your ability to be introspective and your resiliency when your people push back or when there's failure. Yeah. Those are ways that I can always see and just go, oh man, this is about you, right? Like the fact that you can't say you're sorry or own that it was, you failed or messed up, or like these things are clear indicators that really this is about you. The other thing too, this is going to bother a lot of people.
Uh-oh.
I'll just say it.
Go ahead, say it.
Anytime you say, this is my baby, and I know, I get it. There are people I know that will be like, oh man, I say that all the time. I get it. I've started things. I understand. But what that tells me is that it's become your identity. Yeah. And I would caution you. That is one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make, is when you make it about yourselves, you connect your identity to the work that you do. And that's not who you are, man.
Yeah.
You're a child of God. It doesn't matter the type of work you do. God can call you to different things. He made you, and you can apply that in different spaces. But I'm not, like, I started and ran something called Solidarity. I'm not Solidarity. And thank God that I'm not, because then he called me to UIWI. And guess what? I'm not UIWI either. You know what I mean? This isn't, right? I'm here to lead. And it's hard for me to do that. And it's hard for me to hear the truth from people. If when you tell me that something's wrong with UIWI, but it's my identity, you're saying that something's wrong with
personally,
me.
Right.
And so there's a lot of pitfalls when you start going down that path.
I think there's a deeper issue here too, because I think when you hear this, like, oh, the biggest mistake you can make as a leader is don't make it about yourself. You can immediately think about the narcissistic, charismatic leader who's out there and has underlings chasing them around all the time, getting them coffee and all that, and you think, oh yeah, that person makes it about them. But there's a subtleness to this. So what I mean by that is, you can make it all about you because you haven't dealt with the trauma that you have in your life. And sometimes your trauma will make you make decisions and build things around yourself to help you feel better about that trauma.
Yeah.
That's still making it about yourself. It's not making it about the mission or about the people that you're serving. You're making it about yourself. Now, there's a healthiness there that needs to be present.
Yeah.
And really what we say is like, hey, let's deal with why you feel you have to be at every event. Let's talk about why you feel it's not going to work unless you're there.
Yeah.
Right? Let's talk about why, and like in the previous episode, we talked about you can't say no to things.
Yep.
All of those things mean you're making it about you. It's all around you. But a lot of times it's because we are dealing with, as leaders, this trauma, or we haven't dealt with, I should say, this trauma that we have, and it's leaking out into our decision-making and how we build our organizations.
In fact, a lot of times I've seen leaders do this, and a lot of us have done this, where your mission and vision is based on that trauma, where it's like, I was hurt in this way, and so I'm going to rescue people who've been hurt in this way. But there's no like healing. It's just out of that wound, and hey, if God led you to, that's great. We actually want to see that. That's amazing that you have that testimony, but you want to lead people towards healing or towards a completion or growth or, in that process. And if it's always just bleeding out of you,
it's more about how, in that case, because we do want that, right? If you have experienced something and then you have a heart for people who are experiencing that same thing, that's beautiful. And yes, God probably has redeemed you to do that. But then it becomes about the how are you doing it?
Yeah.
It's not the what. The what is okay. It's the how are you going about helping others deal with that trauma. And what you don't want to do is recreate other versions of yourself in the process, right?
No, that's good, man. And so we have those two, right? Not being strategic, only being tactical when you're making it about yourself or your identity is connected to the work, Another one is, and it goes along with some of the things we've been talking about, it's like not utilizing your team well or misusing them. Like this is one of the biggest mistakes that I'm watching leaders make, where you have like these incredibly talented people around you. But because it's all about you and you've got to be like the number one person and the person that's indispensable and all that. Like you can't receive the full gifting of that person because somehow that's a threat to you. You can't receive their questions. You can't receive their input because they have different giftings than you. And that at that core of our leadership development here, the antithesis of that is you're here to help me accomplish my goals and vision and dreams.
Yeah.
And whenever I see that, that's why we come across so many leaders that are like, oh man, like so beat down and defeated by toxic leadership and leaders that are terrible at this. And because they love God, they'll be misused over and over and over again until they finally just quit, when it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. And again, those are the obvious ones, right? Those are the ones where we see toxic leadership, toxic org cultures.
They're
right?
embezzling money. They're
or they're
sexually
just,
harassing people.
or they're just abusing people, not really care, and it stems from really not caring about ultimately the people that you're leading. But again, let's talk about the subtleness, because I know you can have leaders going, "Oh, well, that's not me, right? That's not me. I don't abuse my my staff, my team, or whatever." Yeah. But here's another way that you could somehow sometimes misuse or not utilize your team properly, is if you basically give them too much freedom. And what I mean by that is you're just like, "Oh yeah, man, I'm an empowerer. You do you. I let you do whatever you want." And what happens is people, because let's remember, we all have healthy and unhealthy versions of ourselves. Yeah. And in any given organization, there are degrees of that on your staff, right? I think our job as a leader is we want to help our people operate in a healthy way. So if somebody's unhealthy on my team and I'm just like, yeah, you do you, I'm basically giving them permission to be unhealthy. Yeah. So that's misuse of our team as well, right? That's right. So getting to know your team, getting to know your staff, getting to know their level of healthiness or unhealthiness, I think for us as leaders, that's the thing that we want to help them move toward, is that healthiness. Yeah. So it's not like, oh, okay, we'll just let everybody be, and that way everybody gets to do what they want, and that's the best way to use your team. No, I think there's a tension there between utilizing them to do just what you want and letting them do freely what they want.
Right.
Right. There's something in the middle, tension, which is, hey, together we're trying to accomplish some things. How can I use the strengths of each individual on the team to help us accomplish that? And then how can I as a leader help them heal or grow in a healthy way from the things that maybe they're not so good at?
Yeah, no, that's good. And part of it of being the leader is to help develop leaders, right? So there's that place where you can't just micromanage them on one end, and you can't just like, hey, do whatever you want. I'm not here to develop you.
Yeah.
As long as you don't mess up what I'm trying to do, I don't care. And a lot of times I see in that space this weird spiritualization of ineptness, where you're like, well, they really need the job, or like, have the hard conversation. Like, it's not okay that they just live in status quo and they're not growing and they're not being confronted with how they can be better and who they were created to be. That's not kind. And that's that Peter principle where people keep on getting promoted into, inefficiency, or, it's like
incompetent, their level of incompetence.
Yeah. You're just like, I don't know what we're going to do with you. So let's stick you in the corner office, or in the basement, so we don't have to deal with you. Right.
Yeah.
It's the stapler guy from Office Space.
Yes.
Right? So, but that's not kind either. And we see a lot of people, they're not utilizing their team well because they're not developing them.
Yeah. Here's the other thing, and I think I don't want to get sidetracked on this issue, but I think it's related to this. And this is something, Tommy, that you've taught me, and I think that you do really well, is not just looking at how can they help us win as an org, but also how can I help you win as an individual? Yeah. Like, what are your own personal hopes out of this, right? Yeah. What are your personal dreams? So I have to care about those as well, because if you're not caring about those equally to what they can do for you in the organization, then are you leading them or just using them?
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's a big difference. And just a side note on that, what's really beautiful about that is it actually keeps people on the train a lot longer, because they're like, oh, you really care about me. I'm like, yeah, because again, if UIWI is not my identity, and I'm here to help you become everything you were created to be, I'm already thinking kingdom-wise. I'm like, you're not going to be here forever. So I want you to leave this place better than when you started here, with more skill sets, more understanding. So wherever you go, you bless that place. Like, we all win from that.
Yeah.
Your family wins, your friends win, your church wins. In my mind, the ROI on that's like massive. But if it's about me, I don't have time for you, and I don't care about your
there's
stuff.
A fear that I may lose you, and I really need you.
Right. Because, oh shoot, you're a means to an end.
Yeah.
And that's where you get these really ugly spaces. And yeah, we want to change that, man. Yeah. Lastly, as we talk about this, man, we talked about this earlier. I think one of the biggest mistakes that leaders are making is really worrying about what others are doing. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
basically it's a little bit of that sort of envy. One of the things I say is like, envy is a terrible canvas on which to paint. It doesn't work, right? When I'm spending too much time worrying about, well, what's that other leader doing? Or what's that other church doing? What's that other org doing? Yeah. And I'm constantly, what it does is it puts me in a catch-up. I'm constantly playing catch-up to those other people, those other individuals. Yep. And the thing we miss about that is that what may be working really well in other spaces doesn't necessarily translate into my space. And I think the other thing it does is it kills innovation.
Yeah.
When we're constantly looking for what we can copy to be just like them, you're never innovating, and you're missing out on what God is trying to do uniquely in your particular organization or in your particular context.
Dude, absolutely. And so really this idea of worrying about what other people are doing, this is actually one of the, I don't know if it's a birthplace or, the genesis of this, but this is where a lot of that tactical, to go back to the very beginning of this podcast, like the tactical things come from, did you see how they set up their lobby? Oh, did you see how they're doing this? You see how, and then you just are adopting that instead of, we'll play it through the whole, everything we just talked about, instead of being like, but we're a gift here. We're in a certain context. We're created a certain way. This is the team we have. Like, we're unique. What does God have for me? What's the strategy that God has for us, right? It's not about me, so it doesn't have to be based on me. It's about what God's up to here and how does he want to utilize who we are so that we can see that happening. And then how do I utilize my team members for that, right? So that we can do something unique and special that God has for us. Like, if churches and nonprofits, if everybody behaved that way, incredible, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm not like, hey, I took what you did, I just do it better than you. It's like, I can cheer you on and be fully okay with we're doing it this way. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't learn from other people. It doesn't mean that you can't be like, hey, our strategy is this, but I notice your tactic is this. Can I learn from that? That's great. That's wisdom. Yeah. But what we're talking about is there's just this sense of like, because we're just tactical, and really the core is just like numerical growth if you're talking about on the church side.
Yeah.
Right. And there's so much more than that, right? And so if you have a clear vision, if you understand who you're created to be, if you understand who God's given you, and you start to put all the things we've been talking about all this year about, you start to have a different type of org, church, business, family that starts to behave a different way. And we think this would be a really beautiful world if you guys were all doing what you were created to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's actually, I believe, a scriptural component to this, right? Because we talk a lot about the body. And we know Paul is very clear, right? When he wrote to the Corinthians, he's saying, hey, look, you guys are all unique, different parts of the body.
Yeah.
Right? Which his whole point on that is God has given you a specific and unique function to form as part of the body. You can't all be the same thing.
Right.
He didn't want cookie cutter versions all over the place, right? Because every environment is different, every city is different, every community is different, right?
Yeah.
So there's a certain fingerprint that each one has. But I translate that also not just as individuals, but also as churches, right? As faith communities, as orgs, right?
Yeah.
Each org, each church should have its own unique function. It should be part of the body as well, a unique part of the body.
Yeah.
But we're all trying to be the same. We're all trying to wear the the same shoes. We're all trying to wear the same clothes. We're all trying to sing the same music. There's so many things that we're copying. Again, we're not saying that you can't do those things, that they don't have a place. Obviously, if somebody does something really well and it's valuable, yes, of course, we can learn from that or even use that, right? Technology is a great example of that, right? If somebody's using a particular tech and they developed it, like, I think Life Church has developed some technology, right? And everybody starts using it, that's great. Those kinds of things are fine. What we're talking about is constantly trying to model somebody else's style without ever understanding what your substance is.
Yeah, it's
right?
so good.
That's what you have to do. And again, worrying about what others are doing are going to keep you away from thinking about, well, what is God trying to do with me? What is God trying to do with us?
Yeah.
What is God trying to do here in this community? And you're going to miss it because you're too busy looking somewhere else.
And that's what's exciting for me and that's actually why our strategic storyline process and the way that our values are set up here, we always talk when we sit with leaders or partners, we're like, hey, we're not trying to impose this on you. The structures and the training we have is built so it's fluid enough. There's frameworks to help you, but I'm not trying to tell you what to do in Cleveland, Ohio, in the school system, or if you're in East LA working with gang members, or we're actually there to learn as well. We're like, oh, well, like we want to understand who you are. We want to gather that. We want to help you get a direction to be what you were created to be. If everybody's trying to be Homeboy Industries, like why? Like you can learn a lot from them, but you're not Father Greg Boyle. Right. You're not, I don't know if we need everybody to be Homeboy Industries. LA needed that. Yeah. Because of, what gangs are like here. But think about all the hopes and dreams that are out there that God wants to see flourish, that we're just like, nope, like, I guess you got to do it this way. And you can see the church is in crisis with that right now, because it really is built on, no, if I could just figure out the perfect set of the theological treaties and the perfect this, and then we could just box it. It's kind of like a capitalistic way of looking at, it really is. The kingdom of God, and the kingdom of God's just above all that, right? It's just like, or I'm big enough and as a creator God to be like, no, I created you really unique and special. Let's co-create this thing together in this space with you and with others. To me, that just is so much more exciting than kind of like big box kind of, okay, let's just recreate the widget all over the world. Yeah. And it looks the same. I'm like, I'm not interested in that. And I don't think that's how God works. So,
I don't think so either. I think, again, there's a unique perspective that you can bring and that those around you and your team can bring, and collectively that forms a whole different kind of organism. Yeah. And that organism has its own fingerprint. And so what excites me is helping leaders find that fingerprint. Yeah. What is that thing, that unique thing that God has given you, and how can we help you like draw that out of you and infuse it into the vehicle that you're trying to create, the organization that you're trying to create, so that you can truly be the local expression of the global church. Yep. That's what we hope for.
I love it. Well, friends, you know what? We know we talked a lot. We talked a lot about the biggest mistakes that leaders can make. And here's what we want you to know. Even if you're making those mistakes, you choose. You can change today. And we're here to help you with that. And so we're praying for you. We thank you for what you do in the kingdom of God. And so we hope this has been helpful for you to frame it some different ways so that you can be the leader that you were created to be. So thanks for joining us on the Futures Here podcast. And we hope to see you again soon. Peace.